Hi guys, Comic Boom here to review Mr. Miracle issue 9. Guys, I think the bloom is slowly coming off Tom King's rose. Or the rose that is Tom King. Or maybe it isn't. But here's the thing. I've been pretty hard on Tom King's Batman lately. And I think rightly so, because I think he's not very... He's really moving away from the character development. He has some issues where he can really develop and focus on character, and then he has issues where he has the Booster Gold issues, which were awful in Batman, and then he has the latest Batman 48 with the Joker and the Church, which was awful. And he's moving away so that we're not really getting any development of the character of Batman, and we're not really getting any deep character development of Catwoman. We're not really getting into their heads in terms of what's going on in the pages of Batman. Now, Mr. Miracle's a little different. Now, so far, Mr. Miracle's been really good. I've been very happy so far with the first 8 issues, because I really think that there's a lot of symbolism going on there, and that particularly whether or not any of this is real. Mr. Miracle, we believe that Scott Free, who's Mr. Miracle, and we believe that it starts off in the first issue where we thought maybe he's killed himself because he attempted suicide. And so it's possible that this entire series, which is 12 issues long, and we're on issue 9, that this entire series is just taking place in Mr. Miracle's head, in Scott Free's head, and that he's been infected by the anti-life equation, because Tom King has been really good with artist Mitch Gerard, whatever, of coming up with 9-panel grids and occasionally having a Dark Side Is panel, a full black Dark Side Is panel, suggesting the growing infection of the anti-life in the mind of Scott Free. And so it's hard to know what's real and what isn't. Now, what's interesting so far is, now Scott and Big Barda had a child named Jacob. And the symbolism of that, or so I thought, is that the name Jacob is very interesting, because Jacob could be a reference to Jacob's Ladder. Now, Jacob's Ladder was specifically mentioned by Mr. Miracle last issue, because Jacob's Ladder was the ladder that you used to crawl out of a pit. Like, so if you were on Apocalypse, there were some pits you had to work in, and Jacob's Ladder is what you had to use to crawl out of the pit. And also symbolically in our mythologies, Jacob's Ladder is sort of like the ladder that you crawl to get out of hell and into heaven, basically. So the fact that they named their child Jacob is very interesting. Now, this issue here, and again, a beautiful cover there. This issue here, basically, the war between apparently is over. We don't get a lot of, it shows a lot of the destruction and the ongoing. There was always that juxtaposition between the wars and the casual conversation between Big Barda and Mr. Miracle. It's getting to be a cliche already that we get these scenes of great horror juxtaposed against scenes of everyday mundane life. The juxtaposition of the horror and the mundane. I want to give a shout out to the crew at Weird Science DC, because they also have been stating this, and they've recognized this, and they've been very patient as well. But I'm sympathetic to some of their arguments on this at Mr. Miracle. Where is this going? Where is this series going? Because it seems more of the same. Because in this issue, it's one giant negotiation scene. Again, the 9-panel grids, it's one giant negotiation scene between Big Barda. There's Big Barda and Mr. Miracle representing New Genesis, and they're talking to Kanto and Kalibak, who represent Darkseid, negotiating the terms of an armistice in order to end the war between New Genesis and Apocalypse. And basically, the whole thing is one giant negotiation, and again, it's just one long conversation, and it's interesting, but in between negotiations, there's the symbolism again it's rampant with symbolism, but whether or not it actually means anything in the long run, I don't know. There's a scene here where Kanto and Mr. Miracle are literally peeing over into a pit, and Kanto is telling Scott Free a story about it's about two magicians, or two painters that want to woo a crowd, and well, I almost don't even want to bore you with it. Suffice to say, it's just, once again, it's a scene that basically its purpose is to clearly show that it can be difficult to discern between what is real and what is not real. And that sometimes a painting can be so real that you can't tell the difference between that and real life. While at the same time, if you can't tell the difference between a painting and what is real, then how do you know the painting isn't as real as real life? And so if that's the case, then what's the difference between maybe life and the anti-life equation? What's the difference? How would you know if you're experiencing the anti-life equation or not? If you can't tell the difference between what is real and what is not real, well then how do you know that your life has any meaning? How do you know it's not meaningless? How do you know that you're not experiencing the anti-life right now? So maybe that's where the symbolism is going here. And more. Again, great dialogue. There's some scenes here where Scott is looking in a mirror and he sees himself as a normal looking guy, and then another scene he looks and he sees himself in Big Barda as scarred and being horribly burned and damaged, presumably from the war. Again, it's that juxtaposition between the horrors of everyday life, the horrors of war, and just the mundane, just the normal, right? That seems to be an ongoing theme here, and it's again, it works, but where's it going? Are we going to get a payoff? And ultimately then, at the end, we get into a huge revelation at the end that Darkseid, they think they've negotiated an end to the war, but Darkseid, of course, disrupts everything through Kalibak, because Darkseid does not appear in this comic book. Of course, he's the big guy. He just appears as a Darkseid Is panel every now and then. Basic Kalibak comes back and tells Scott and Big Barda that, look, Darkseid wants your son. If you really want peace, Darkseid will give you a lot more than what you've been asking for. He'll even give you some of the stuff you weren't asking for. And Darkseid will even give you back and surrender the anti-life equation if you give him your son. Give him your son. Give Jacob to Darkseid, and you'll have gotten everything you wanted, including the anti-life equation. Well, now this is huge. This is huge. And basically that's how it ends. And so you got to wonder, what is Scott going to decide? Because Scott himself was raised on Apocalypse. Scott was the son of Highfather. And eons ago, we got to remember the significance of this, because Highfather and Darkseid exchanged their firstborn eons ago. And Darkseid's son, Orion, was raised by Highfather, while Darkseid raised Scott free, who ultimately became Mr. Miracle. So Scott knows what the horrors are on Apocalypse. And the last thing Scott would want would be for his son to be raised on Apocalypse. And Big Barda does not want that either, because Big Barda was also raised on Apocalypse as a female Fury under Granny Goodness. So the last thing they want is to sacrifice their son to Darkseid. Now, it's so interesting here when you look at the symbolism again, another more great symbolism that I hope has some payoff. And I got to give King credit here that even the use of the name Jacob, Jacob's ladder, is that ladder that you climb to get out of hell. So the fact that Darkseid wants Jacob, is that symbolic of the fact that he wants Jacob? So ultimately Jacob will be the ladder upon which Darkseid will symbolically climb in order to ascend to heaven and destroy heaven as well, so that Darkseid himself can leave the pits of his own hell that he created and crawl out of it, ultimately through the help of his adopted son Jacob, that he's going to acquire from these negotiations, and ultimately crawl up to heaven, our realm, to destroy us all. Is that the symbolism? Because that's kind of cool if it is, but I kind of doubt it, because Tom King is really not that good at the payoffs. He hasn't his Batman run again. I've given him compliments on some of it. Like, I loved his Batman Annual too, but that was a one shot. I liked the War of Jokes and Riddles. There was a decent payoff there, but they had some hills and valleys. Here, I don't know what the payoff's going to be. Is this all in his head? Is it even real? I don't know, but it's interesting anyway. It's still intriguing as hell to me. It's intriguing as hell. I mean, again, we're issue 9. We only got 3 issues left. I really want there to be a payoff here, so my fingers are crossed. We're going to have to wait and see. Guys, tell me what you think. Is there some symbolism here that you really like, that I missed? That please tell me about it. Enlighten me with your thoughts. to see if there's anything I missed, or maybe I'm starting to be too pessimistic. So feel free to enlighten me on the comments below. In the meantime, guys, I'll talk to you later, and Comic Boom out.